Morning, everybody. Video today regarding the eccentric utilization ratio. So as far as applications, we'll start with that. I use this with my athletes to determine what we need to work on more, especially when we're talking about power movements. So like vertical jump, broad jump. If we're trying to improve horizontal force production or certain aspects of anything, as far as athleticism, this is a great tool. So we're just going to use vertical as an example for today, but this can apply to a broad jump, and this can also apply to any power movement, really, where you're able to measure peak power. So let's start with an explanation of what strength and power are. Okay, so strength is your baseline. It's about how much weight you can move. Essentially, power is, to oversimplify it, power is strength times speed. So it's about velocity as well as strength. So that's how you're actually going to apply things to the field or to the court, is through power. Strength alone isn't going to do the trick because you're going to be needing to move fast as well. But strength is the baseline to develop power. All right. So just understanding that is key. There's two different things that go into that: elasticity, and obviously elasticity being speed, and then strength, which is also force production. So if I refer to those things, that's what I'm talking about. SSC, stretch shortening cycle. So you have a slow and a fast stretch shortening cycle, okay? So this is going to pertain more to the slow stretch shortening cycle because you're going to be at the bottom of a counter movement and you're going to counter move all the way down. And so basically, to talk about the stretch shortening cycle, those are measured by ground contact times. Over 250 milliseconds is going to be considered a slow stretch shortening cycle. Under 250 milliseconds is going to be considered a fast stretch shortening cycle. Different movements and different things you do athletically fall into each category. All right. So you got to train both. A lot of knee dominant, hip dominant movements are going to fall under the slow stretch shortening cycle because the amortization phase, which is how long you spend on the ground between the eccentric and the concentric, you're going to be on the ground a lot longer. Okay. So that's, a lot of high power movements are going to be in the slow stretch shortening cycle. The under 250, that's going to be like jump ropes, single leg stuff, quickness movements more so that are ankle dominant. You're not, your vert jump and your broad jump or your horizontal force production through acceleration. Those are going to be more on the slow end of the stretch shortening cycle. So 2 measurements are needed to calculate the elastic utilization ratio. You need your counter movement jump, which is the CMJ you see there, and then you need your squat jump. Okay, so counter movement jump is just, if we're taking a vertical, you just stand up tall, tippy toes, snap down quick, explode up. All right, that's your counter movement. That snap down is your counter movement. The time you spend on the ground between the two is your amortization phase, and then that jump up is considered your concentric. So that counter movement is also called the eccentric. Okay, so I know I'm throwing a lot of words at you, but that is the counter movement jump. Okay, so that's when you snap down, you store kinetic energy, and that helps you develop power on your concentric, okay? With a squat jump, what you're doing is you're putting your hands on your hips. Again, in the case of a vert, you're putting your hands on your hips, and you're just jumping from a squat. So you squat down to where you would jump from, and you just take out that counter movement, and then you jump. So that ratio, dividing the two, gives you your elastic or eccentric utilization ratio. Basically just tells you how much are you using that eccentric and that stretch shortening cycle, that quick snap down, that elasticity. How much are you using that? How much are you depending on just your strength, right? It's 2 ways to measure that as well. So for a vert, it would be like a height method or a distance method for a broad jump. And then a peak power method is going to be for either with velocity-based techniques or a pad that senses how much power output you're producing. You would get your power output and determine it based on peak power as opposed to height. Either one works, but essentially, you're just trying to determine. But they have to be consistent. You can't do your counter movement jump with height and then the squat jump with power, obviously. So you take the 2 of them, whatever you get for each of them, and you divide the counter movement jump by the squat jump. Your counter movement jump should be higher or more powerful, whichever the case is. It would be impossible for it to not be because, that means there's something seriously wrong. But, so then you get a number. So you're going to get a number generally a little bit over 1. I've seen guys a lot higher than 1. So a lot of the time, high school kids, like kids I've trained that are in high school, they're gonna have a higher ratio because they depend on elasticity a lot more because they don't have a lot of weight training experience. My higher level athletes, the college and above, they tend to have even and be in that good range. So let's talk about the ranges. 1.0 to 1.2. This is a little arbitrary. There's been studies done that put this range out. There's also been studies that show that 1.1 is optimal. It's just a matter of, this is really understudied in the industry and it's something that needs a lot more research done, but it's still a good way to get an idea of what's going on. So 1.0 to 1.2 means that your stretch shortening cycle and elasticity is lacking. Your strength jump, your squat jump, which is based on your strength, it's pretty much the same as your counter movement jump, which shows that you need to work more on your elasticity. You need to do more depth jumps, plyometrics, things of that nature that are going to be, focused on your elasticity improving and your speed and your stretch shortening cycle being more powerful, okay? You want your stretch shortening cycle to be faster. That doesn't mean that your ground contact time is faster, right? You're still on the ground for 0.25 or longer seconds because it's 250 milliseconds because you're in that slow stretch shortening cycle, but your actual speed of the power you're producing is higher. All right. 1.2 to 1.4 is about even. Just because you're in this range doesn't mean that you're good. That might mean that you're bad at both, realistically, right? Like you might have a terrible squat jump and you might have an equally terrible counter movement jump. Just because you're in that range doesn't mean that you're good. That just means that good. You can train both evenly now. 1.4 or higher. Again, this is the higher end. Like some people will consider 1.3, they'd consider 1.3, 1.25 even to be pretty high. That means that you have lower strength output. You need to be lifting more weights and your elasticity is good as it is. So if you're lighter and you're younger and you've just been playing basketball, you haven't really lifted a lot, this is where you'll find yourself. And getting a strength increase will increase your power output and your jump height and things of that nature by a lot. So that's basically what the eccentric utilization ratio is used for. I use this with my athletes to determine where we're going to spend our time. It really helps us be efficient. Of course, I think if you know what you're doing to an extent, you should be able to use this as well. Hopefully, this helps some guys that are working on their own. If you have any questions, feel free to DM me. I'm always looking to help, and yeah, hit me up.